Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Welcome today. So happy to see you. We are on the October 31st meeting of the General Obligation Bond Executive Committee, and I hereby call this meeting to order. To start, we have interpreters today to provide Spanish interpretation, and I would like to ask them to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Elsie Duarte, and along with my colleague Carmen Cota, we will be serving as interpreters in today's meeting. I will now introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días, mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y junto con mi colega Carmen Cota estaremos sirviéndoles como intérpretes en la reunión de hoy. Al momento de hacer un comentario público, de favor les pedimos que hable despacio, con claridad y deténgase después de cada pocas oraciones para interpretarle de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you as well. There will be public comment period today. It's item 3 on the agenda. I'm planning to reserve at least 30 minutes for the public comment, but I will decide the duration and time limit for each speaker based on the available time and the number of individuals registered to speak. If you are attending in person and would like to speak, please sign up at the kiosk located at the entrance to the council chamber. Once we begin the public comment, you will not be able to sign up. And if you are attending virtually and would like to speak at a future Go Bond Committee meeting, please note that you need to register at least 2 hours prior to the start of the meeting. So you may register online for that. So with that, let's begin with the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting on October 24th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments? Those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So carried. Thank you. Let me start now with some introductory remarks. During the last 2 meetings, the Executive Committee has heard recommendations from the 8 Go Bond subcommittees. Subcommittee recommendations totaled $717 million. So our starting point has grown from the prioritized capital needs identified by staff. We now, today, have the difficult task of condensing this into a $500 million recommendation for the City Council. We need to complete our work no later than November 17th, if not earlier, to ensure that our recommendations are ready for City Council in December. As a reminder, City leadership has indicated the intent is to do recurring bond programs every 5 years. That is a total investment of $2 billion over 20 years. Projects not advanced to City Council may be considered in future bond programs. You may also consider partial funding of a program where feasible for the 2023 bond program, knowing that the planning for a 2028 bond program would begin in 2026 and could potentially fund a second or later phase of a 2023 proposed project. Today, we will begin our deliberations. Staff will help facilitate our discussions by tracking deliberations and totals on our screens. I will reserve time toward the end of the meeting to hear public comments, and I will give committee members time to respond to public comment before we adjourn the meeting. Staff provided the committee at the last meeting with reports by program area and detailed information on each project for reference. Information provided includes other funding sources, if applicable, already identified by staff to offset proposed budget costs. In addition, staff also provided reports relating to additional funds available in the city's current budget that supplement certain program areas and a list of projects that are considered scalable. I encourage you to refer to all materials provided by staff in your decision-making. So with these opening remarks, I would now like to ask our City Manager, Jeff Barton, to provide remarks to the subcommittee.
Thank you, Chairman Harper, members of the subcommittee. I know you're here today with a very, very tough and difficult task. This is something that we've been working on for the better part of, just being honest with you, 15 years. It's taken us 16 years to get to a place where we've had another bond program. And as a major city, the 5th largest city in the country, we should not be operating bond programs once every 2 decades. It's inexcusable, and quite frankly, it's to some degree financially irresponsible on our behalf when we have materials and facilities that we have to maintain, as well as keep up with the growth and development of our city. We all know there are certain challenges that we've dealt with over the last couple of years from COVID and everything else. All that has really done is exacerbate the need for additional capital resources being infused into our operating budget. For some of you who've been around for a really long time, you know firsthand when we've done bond programs in the past. I have the benefit of looking back and looking at the historical perspective. When we've done bond programs in the past, and Rick is here, and Steve, and some others that have been through this, we've honestly done too large of a bond program. And when we've done those bond programs that were that large, we've had to either A, defer a portion of the bond programs and never get to those projects that the residents and citizens have voted for, or A, we have to stretch it out so long that we don't have enough money to address and provide for the resources or for the items that were voted on because of cost escalation. I'll use an example, a fire station. Again, I think I've talked to you about this before. A couple years ago, we could build a fire station for $7 million. Today, that same fire station approaches $20 million. That's just for normal cost escalation. We're seeing about a 30% increase in capital construction costs. The other thing that I'm worried about is just the economy. You know, I've been responsible for the economy, or working with the budget and the finances of the city for the past, actually my whole career as an auditor, all the way through budget and research to the city manager's office. And I don't take lightly the improvement that we've done over the last decade. We've right-sized the budget, we've honed in our revenue projections, and we've actually gotten the city and our council to understand the benefit and the need to have healthy and proper reserves. With that being said, this bond program is something that we conceived as well, trying to stay within the confines of that financial responsibility. One, I don't want to raise property taxes on our residents in this current economic environment. When property taxes are just a small portion of their home ownership, it still is an additional expense that they have, and it just doesn't make sense for us to do that. The other thing, to raise the property tax would net additional resources for a bond program, but just being frank and honest, we don't have the opportunity or the ability to operate more than $500 million. If you look at what we've got in this $500 million package, there's about $40 to $50 million worth of additional operating expense. That means we have to find capacity in the existing operating budget to swallow and absorb that additional operating expense over the next 5 years. That's not easy. I say that it's not easy, especially considering that we have labor negotiations about to start in the next couple of months. Our employees are our most valuable resource. We say that all the time, and I think it's time that we as a city show that. We're having a very difficult time hiring. We sit on 2,700 vacancies across the organization, and a lot of that is because we're not paying ample salaries to recruit into those salaries. I mentioned to you that $14 million is what 1% in total compensation equates to for our city employees. So if we start to approach a significant number of, say it's 10%, and again, I'm not trying to be charged of an unfair labor practice, Jennifer, who's negotiated with us before, but a 10% wage increase would be about $140 million for 1 year. And we typically do a 2-year contract. So if you exacerbate that over 2 years, that would approach about $300 million that we have to absorb. So there is no additional capacity in the operating budget. I can say that as the former budget director. I can say that as my capacity overseeing the budget department now. The other thing that we have to worry about is a very tenuous, I should say, legislative session that will be coming next year with the legislature, and no matter who the governor is, we run the risk of losing residential rental tax. That's an additional $46 million loss to the general fund and an additional $88 million to all funds. That takes away from our ability to operate additional resources and facilities. So again, I know the task is not easy. You're sitting about $200+ million above the $500 million target. I did provide additional targets to you just to help the conversation. Again, my targets were not etched in stone, but my targets did take into account other resources that come to bear from other departments, as well as, again, knowing what our departments can deliver. And sometimes I, as city manager, have to protect my departments from saying that they can get more done than they really can. So with that being said, Chairman Harper, I turn it back to you.
Thank you very much for your leadership and your advice as we go into these discussions. That's very valuable, and we appreciate it. I would like to start this meeting with us deciding on an overall approach to guide our decision-making today. The city manager has recommended targets by subcommittee program areas for our consideration. Several factors were taken into account in the development of these targets. As the city manager just explained, they include the staff's ability to execute the projects in the next 5-year time frame, impact to operating costs, and equitable distribution of projects throughout the city. Please keep these factors in mind as we proceed forward. Whether the committee accepts these targets or a modified version, I believe identifying targets by program area will help to achieve our goal in identifying a $500 million bond program to recommend to the City Council. If during our discussions and deliberation adjustments are needed to target levels to arrive at final decision, we can adjust these targets as we go forward. Once we first determine target amounts by subcommittee area, we would move to making decision on desired projects and funding levels to achieve each target. I would recommend members of this committee, who also serve as subcommittee chairs, to consider recommended adjustments to your respective program areas to achieve the agreed upon targets. When I refer to funding level adjustments, I am primarily referring to the recommended projects that have been noted as being scalable. Staff is here to answer questions on individual projects. The opportunity to adjust the size and scope of projects to achieve funding levels where feasible. If the committee agrees with this approach, once targets are identified, we would discuss each subcommittee program area's projects and funding levels in order presented at the first 2 meetings. We will start with the streets and storm drainage. I would like to now open the meeting for members to discuss this approach, and then we can move forward. Any comments or suggestions from our committee members?
Madam Chair, I do. Yes. Yeah, my question, Mr. City Manager, you and your staff have done a phenomenal job. You make it pretty clear what the cutoff is, that $500 million. But there's a lot of talk out there. I'm sure it's probably got back to you. So I think we need to hear it again. The number I heard, that there was actually $620 million we could go to without raising property taxes. So, and you know how the talk is. Everybody is asking for more than they were allotted. So as we move forward, and we need to draw a line, and we don't have a whole lot of time, again, can you make it crystal clear with everybody how much is available without raising property taxes?
Sure, I will make it crystal clear, Steve. But before I answer that, I asked the chair to give me a little bit of latitude to go probably a little long on this one. I will say that there's never enough money. When we go through an operating budget, when we go through the bond process, there's never enough. I think Amber said it when we first started this conversation with you a few weeks ago. The last bond program, the $870+ million program, what was submitted through the capital needs study was over $3 billion. So we turned away $2.5 billion worth of requests. This program, what was submitted from a capital needs perspective, was about $1.2, $1.3 billion. So again, we're turning away $700 million that we can't afford. Steve, when we went through, this is the second time that we've started this process. We started with our Fiscal Capacity Committee right before COVID. Ron Butler was on that committee with us, and we walked through several scenarios. We walked through, at that point, first time it was just a public safety bond. Then we looked at expanding that to other bond programs and incorporating other programs into that bond program. When we were walking Ron through that prior to COVID, we walked that committee through 500, 600, 650, 700, 750 to explain and show them why we couldn't afford it. And I think we made it clear to that Fiscal Capacity Committee that we couldn't afford it without raising property tax, as well as placing additional pressure on our bond rating, as well as placing additional pressure on our operating budget from an operating cost perspective. Because of COVID, that committee was kind of sequestered. We brought them back right after that when we started this process up again. We walked them through the same scenarios. We also walked our council through, prior to the executive committee having these meetings being convened, looking again at $500, $600, and $700 million. The way our property taxes are currently structured to pay for our the secondary portion of our property tax are what pay for our bond programs. The way it is structured now, the majority of our debt drops off between fiscal year 27 and 28. And so what we've done with this program is we've structured it in such a way that the first $500 million is what will fit as the first portion of our debt expires in those first years until the major drop-off happens. And that is no more than $500 million. We will have to maximize the property tax rate at its current level for the next several fiscal years until the debt starts to drop off. Then we can layer in more, which is where the second bond program comes in fiscal year 28. So I'm here to tell you, I wish there was more money, but there is not, without raising property tax on our residents, without placing additional burden on our operating budget, which we don't have, or without committing to projects that we just would not be able to complete, because again, the cost escalations would run up. We'd have to stretch this thing out past the 5-year mark. And by doing that, the cost of the construction projects that we're talking about, they would exceed the cost that would be available. And so again, we would be doing a disservice, and I think we'd be making a lot of broken promises to our residents that would be voting on this bond program. So I think from my perspective, and I think from my budget director as well as my CFO, who's gone through this analysis with me, there is no more available than $500 million absent someone wanting to raise property taxes. And even if we raise property taxes, that gives us more money for a bond program, but it does not provide us the resources that we need to operate from that bond program. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And it does answer my question. And one message that we definitely heard loud and clear from our mayor and council when they gave us these appointments was to not raise taxes. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Dave.
Madam Chair, I am extraordinarily cognizant of the tough charge that we have coming into the home stretch here. And I think it's important that we have on the capital needs study, each committee had an individual baseline that they were moving forward with. That's the way we took it, as moving forward from that baseline. And if you take a look at a number of the subcommittees, I'm just going to go over some percentages here. Some increased their recommendation by 14.5%. Some increased by 96%. Some increased by 65%, 24.3%, et cetera. So while we're having a conversation about cuts, I just want to remind the committee that we're having a conversation about cuts to, in some cases, which is our case, cuts, in some cases, increases that came based on the capital needs study. It's really important for you all to know that. So if you take the city manager's recommendation from the subcommittee's recommendations, obviously those numbers are accurate, with our committee having a 34.3% reduction. If you take that recommendation from the capital needs study, our cut was 49.3%, much higher. So my point to you, Madam Chair, is I think defining the baseline is important here. I would recommend that the baseline be the capital needs study is where we start, but that's going to be entirely up to the committee. My point to you is the numbers change a little bit as depending on what baseline you use. So on a weighted basis, I know that our committee was approximately 24.8% of the total program, and our committee worked hard to make sure that we were also a weighted portion of the cut, which was 24.9%. So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure I got that out on behalf of our subcommittee to let you know that we worked hard to get to where we are today, absent the city manager's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other members?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I don't want David's comments to go unnoticed from my perspective. As city manager, when I came up with my targets, I took into account a variety of things, as we've talked about. One of those things that I took to heart was the amount of work that each subcommittee put into their list. At the same time, I wanted to take into account some of the comments that were made by the public during those comments. The other thing that we've taken into account in my list is, again, I mentioned earlier, without trying to, make anybody look bad or feel bad, our departments are up against the wall. There are a lot of vacancies. The streets department in particular right now has about 200 vacancies. These are the people that would be out there delivering those capital projects. The other thing that we took into account, which is in your packet and was sent out to you last week, is the streets department, in particular the 3 projects that are contained in the bond program, also have other resources that come to bear, significant resources that come to bear. Pavement maintenance over the next 5 years, in addition to what's requested in the bond program, they have $350 million in other resources that will also be addressing those same projects. They also have another $50 million that address Vision Zero in that same 5-year window. There's only so much capacity from a staffing perspective, construction materials perspective, and just our ability to get things done in that 5-year window. I honestly, Dave, just being quite frank and honest, $400+ million in regular funding and another 80 on top of it, that's going to be a tall task for streets to deliver. Adding another 50 million on top of it to keep them at the 124 that you asked about or that you recommended, I'm just being honest, I don't think we can deliver that. And so therefore I cut it down.
Thank you for that insight. Mr. Neymark?
Madam Chair, I just want to get my thoughts into this discussion too. The city manager said his proposed targets are not etched in stone, and I appreciate that. He's just trying to help us out here based upon his extensive knowledge of the city. I also do not think that what was proposed by staff as prioritized projects to get the program started is etched in stone either. And, we had a whole other list that the staff provided that wasn't prioritized. We had people come into every committee with projects that the staff had not identified, that the subcommittees have determined are meritorious and should be recommended for funding. And we heard a lot of public input during the process about things that were priorities to the public. So I hesitate for us to be too wedded to any particular numbers that have come out. I really trust the subcommittees and the work they did, but obviously the work they did adds up to way more than we're going to be able to recommend. We should definitely, in my opinion, follow the charge that was given to us by the mayor and city council, which is to recommend a $500 million program. If there are projects that we see are super high priority in maybe a next tier, if the city council decides to do something a little bit different, I think we ought to list those as well. Maybe that if you add 50 million or 100 million because you decide to do it, these are things that we might recommend to you that are outside the 500 million. But I definitely would want to stick to the 500. And then something that the city manager said, I just want to clarify. You talked about inflation, and I'm in the business of building and constructing buildings. That's most of what I do with ASU, and this inflation thing is really serious. And I guess my question is, do your numbers have the inflation baked in that you think they ought to, or is 500 going to end up being 650 anyway?
Rick, great question. We actually do allow for inflationary cost increases in our projections, and the numbers that we use that we give departments to build their construction costs off of include that. We also, from a bond rating perspective, we try to bake in interest rate margin. But as Ron probably knows this, probably greater than anybody else at the table, we usually put about a 5%, or not 5%, about a 5-point basis point adjustment in our buffer. We're getting eaten into because of this crazy interest rate. So we're also mindful of that.
Thank you both. Other comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, thank you.
one thing that I as I go through this all the time, just reading it, just that we have this amount of properties that need to be renovated and reconstructed and ADA requirements. And maybe that could be the basis of where we begin. I don't know, but I am just throwing that out there because these are projects that have been put off, and it always comes back up, and then we have new projects that we have to do. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out as a possible baseline to begin.
Thank you for that. Other comments from members?
Madam Chair. Just to build on, thank you, just to build on what Rick shared a moment ago, through the process as a subcommittee chair, there were often times where I think we feared that we were working in a vacuum. We weren't sure what was being discussed at other subcommittees, what was maybe being prioritized elsewhere, and bringing the executive committee together over a series of meetings, to me, really helps to not correct for that, but allows us to discuss across the executive committee. So as a committee chair, to potentially have to, as an individual from the committee, recommend what cuts need to be made from the Arts and Culture Subcommittee specifically gives me, again, pause, but I'm hopeful that we can work together. I have some questions today where what I've heard from other subcommittees might help to solve for the reductions that are needed in my area. So again, I think that we'll be able to work together across committees to determine where we can make some of these changes and reductions as needed. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think we're all really solution-oriented, and as we get into questions and priorities emerge, I think we'll be able to figure this out together.
Madam,
Thank you very much.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, I think with all the discussion, I would like to call for a motion to accept the city manager's recommended targets with flexibility by program area.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you. I think the best way to take the vote would be by roll call. So let me do that, and we can track that. Ron Butler? Jennifer Grandal? Pam Cahaley? Rick Neymark?
I was hoping we'd have some discussion on the motion, but since you're just starting it as a baseline, I think, and if I understand the motion, that's not the end of the line. We may decide to change from that. Is that correct?
With the flexibility, yes.
Then I'll vote aye.
Steve Burling?
Aye.
Diana? Devine?
So I'm sorry, I could barely hear the motion, and then we went to second, and then we went to vote. So we're starting as the recommendation as a baseline?
Yes, with flexibility.
Okay, thank you. I vote aye.
Abraham?
Aye.
David?
Madam Chair, I reluctantly vote aye because I really am advocating on behalf of our subcommittee that we were cut really deep, and this goes pretty deep, but as a matter of being a team player, I'll vote aye.
Devney?
With flexibility, I'll vote aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Ginger Torres?
Aye.
Mary Rose Wilcox?
Sorry about that. I will vote aye, but the flexibility has to be a big part of my aye because we need to discuss, and in the Parks and Rec, we try to keep within the framework, but we do have to look at projects throughout, and I think we need to adjust it a little bit.
Ian?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. So with that, our next step is to move forward and have these discussions, and there is flexibility. As the motion said, the staff has prepared a spreadsheet to track decisions by subcommittee program areas. I will now ask the staff to orient us to the spreadsheet they will be maintaining as we deliberate.
Oh, it's over there.
Madam Chair, so what you're seeing in front of you on your screens, and we can present for the public, is the current executive committee target, what was just adopted as the starting point for discussion, and then current status is, as of right now, what the subcommittees have recommended. So as we go through this process and iterations, we'll be fluidly adjusting the current status so you can see how you stand against the targets that are currently adopted, and as targets need to change, we'll be changing the targets that you're seeing here.
Madam Chair, just a quick clarification for staff. I can't read that, and we don't have screens down here. So is there a, or I can log in on my own screen and probably see it on Zoom, but yeah. There we go. If I turn around, I can see it.
Other comments or questions for staff on this? Well, we do expect this to be an iterative process, and we will conduct our deliberations in a manner similar to those used by many of the subcommittees. As members have recommendations, I will look for the committee as a whole for informal consensus. Staff will only reflect changes in the spreadsheet that have consensus of the committee. I will also ask that members propose one item at a time, and we will only consider one item at a time. We will wait until we have clear structure built before making any actual motions or taking votes. So with that, we will begin by evaluating projects and funding levels. The floor is open for the committees for proposals. We want to go in the order that we followed during our previous meetings, and so our first meeting would be streets and storm drainage.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Question in reference to the information that's in front of us. One of the other tasks for the executive committee was the issue of ongoing operating costs and whether or not we can intertwine that in here into this conversation or onto the spreadsheet, because that will play a pivotal role in our decision. It's not a motion. It's just how are we going to?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, and may I ask the city manager to address that?
Sure. Chairwoman Harper, and members of the committee, what we've kind of, again, we have not done our 5-year forecast yet, but we're basing everything off of our last 5-year forecast and trying to be reasonable and prudent as to what we think we can absorb over the course of the next 5 fiscal years once this bond program runs. And I think from our perspective, just being kind of cautious, but at the same time trying to allow for some flexibility and knowing that there are some things that we have to have that will have operating expenses. For example, fire stations. A 9-minute and 30-second response time is unacceptable, and so we have to build fire stations, and we know that if we were to draw the line now on my recommendations and where the public safety dollars are currently, that would add about $20 million worth of operating expense just for the fire stations alone. And so what I think we're trying to keep things at is somewhere in that $40 to $50 million range for this bond program, just to be reasonable. Amber, Chris, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Jeff. Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee, I would just caveat that with, of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so it's possible that we would not have that amount of available resources to keep the budget balanced. So I would just, we are going to make an assumption that we can absorb some amount of net new ongoing operating expense. I think the question is just about how much we could do. So I wouldn't want to commit to that level. I just want to mention that it's possible, but we'll have to see where we're at. We also know that the projects won't be coming online for about 3 years. So thank you.
And that's the other thing I would add with this is we're looking to do this, and whatever project you ultimately decide, then we would decide when they come online. And so we would take that 5 years and try and line things up so the $50 million doesn't come on all in year one, because then that would be us eating $50 million right off the bat. For 5 years would be another $250 million worth of net ongoing O&M. And so we would want to stagger that so that we could build this thing. And so by the end, we would be in that $40 to $50 million range, to Amber's point.
think that was a great question, and I think this will be a discussion as you talk about what the priorities might change to be. So thank you for that. Would it be helpful at all to hear from staff about other funding? Would that be beneficial as we talk further about how these reductions could take place?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Diane.
So the Housing, Human Service, and Homeless Committee did a really good job of alternative funding and putting that together. So I think it would be really helpful to hear from city staff on that project. And then there's also 2 projects that were listed as scalable that I think at some point we'd like to address too as scalable projects.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think as we get to the program area for that subcommittee, we can have staff come to the table to talk about what's scalable, what are the additional or supplemental funding sources that are available in the city's budget. But if you wanted to keep it with starting with the streets and storm drainage program area, we could have staff from streets come to the table to talk about that point.
I think that would be valuable since we're focusing on that right now.
And Madam Chair, while they're coming up, this is Rick, I just have a couple of thoughts about streets and storm drains. I didn't sit through the subcommittee, although I watched a couple of your meetings. Dave and I both sit on the city's transportation committee, that Citizens Transportation Commission, which oversees the implementation of the 2050 program, which isn't just streets and streets. It's also buses and rail and other improvements like that. So. That funding, in addition to a number of other sources, was identified by the city's staff in our packet for today. So I'm very understanding. I understand your concern being a streets lover and trying to do a lot, but I'm also very understanding of why the city manager, why the subcommittee target ended up in his recommendation lower, because of the very large amount of other funding that's available. My second observation on the subcommittee's recommendations, which I thought were excellent, and I wish we could fund them all, is that possibly all of them are scalable. I guess we need to confirm that. One or 2 of them are not, maybe. Okay. But unlike some subcommittees where every one is a discrete named project, these are buckets of money in most cases, the bigger numbers are buckets of money for particular things. So instead of having to cut the entirety of one element, you may be able to just scale a number of those elements in streets back by some percentage. So I just thought I would throw that in based on my reading of it.
Madam Chair, to that point,
Yes.
it's important for the executive committee to know that the subcommittee considered alternative funding sources already. So that's already part of our recommendation, that alternative funding sources led to some of these additional cuts. So when you hear the presentation from staff, just understand that the subcommittee already considered the alternative funding sources. Now, whether or not there's additional information that will allow us some additional flexibility, completely different conversation, and obviously completely open to that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the committee before we turn this over to staff?
I'll turn everything over to Mario and Streets Director Keeney Knudsen. What I would start off with is saying that a lot to what Rick said, it is scalable. I'll let Kenny and Mario speak to that. I do think, as we mentioned earlier, though, that with some of the flood mitigation type projects, with us getting 65% of that funding from the county, those projects, in my mind, need to kind of stay whole, because we're getting 65% of the cost of that project and only having to invest 35% of our own dollars. So I think that's an area where it makes sense, if possible, to try and keep them as close to whole as possible. I think the other areas that Keeney and Mario will talk through, again, are where we have additional funding in the operating budget already committed or in the CIP already committed to address some of these same type projects.
Thank you, Jeff. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. I'm Mario Paniagua, Deputy City Manager. As a reminder, there are a total of 6 program areas that were in the recommendation for the Streets and Storm Drain Subcommittee. In prioritized order, these are the Vision Zero road safety implementation. Secondly, equity-based transportation mobility improvements. Third is the Levine flood mitigation projects. Fourth is pavement maintenance supplement. Fifth is the Hohokam drainage program. And sixth is the storm drain replacement program. And as mentioned, some of these do include alternative funding sources, and I'll have Keeney explain what those alternative funding sources are. Obviously, you know that these are the GEO bond program submittals are meant to supplement those fund sources, but as mentioned, these are mostly scalable, as Mr. Neymar pointed out. The two that really aren't are the ones that Jeff Barton just mentioned, which are the Levine flood mitigation projects and the Hohokam drainage program, because those include a set of distinct projects within them that would be impacted by cuts. But the others are essentially programs that can be scalable pretty easily. So I'll turn it over to Keeney to talk about the alternative funding sources in those other areas.
Thank you, Mario. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Keeney Knudsen. I'm the Director of Street Transportation for the City of Phoenix. In the memo that was provided, there's 3 programs where we have alternative funding sources for the programs that were included in the bond program recommendations for this subcommittee, for the Streets and Storm Drain subcommittee. The first one I'll talk about is the Vision Zero implementation, going in the order of precedence that the subcommittee put down. With Vision Zero, back last month, the council adopted our Vision Zero Road Safety Action Plan. With that, an allocation of $10 million of funding across 3 different funding sources through our city's general fund, through our HERF gas tax revenues that are allocated by the state, and also from our Transportation 2050 voter-approved sales tax that was approved back in 2015. It's a 0.7 sales tax. Streets receives about 13.8% of that sales tax. A portion of the streets revenues from Transportation 2050 go towards funding different streets projects out there, but $10 million was allocated per year, so $50 million over the course of the 5-year program that would be equivalent to the GEO bond program. With that $50 million, and this is something we talked about with our subcommittee, is used to leverage also not just do local projects, but also leverage federal funding opportunities. Right now, we've on the books allocated about $7.5 million of our first $10 million towards a grant funding opportunity to receive potentially $30 million of federal funds. So that's funding right there, but I will tell you the seriousness and the scale of road safety issues on our roadways, the $10 million, I would say, like I said, there's a lot of need out there in addition to the $10 million, but that's why we included it as a potential bond program project. The next one I'll talk about is the equity-based transportation mobility program. That is a sub-program of the funding from the Transportation 2050 program that we have. And what we had done was about 12 different mobility study areas throughout the city. And with those, we have a funding allocated of a potentially $1 million right now over the 5 years. And that's based on projects we've identified. With the amount of money we have in Transportation 2050, this is what we're able to program right now. We know the needs when it comes to equity-based transportation in these mobility study areas is big. It is about trying to provide connectivity for neighborhoods into our transportation corridors, our transit corridors, and so providing things like sidewalks, streetlights. So right now, that's what funding is allocated there. So it is, like as Mario mentioned, both those ones are scalable with Vision Zero and equity-based transportation, because it's about the money we have available to be able to program for projects we already know are on the books that we need to be able to do. If we don't have the funding to be able to do it, it just won't be able to move forward. The third one I'll lean into a little bit is the pavement maintenance. We do have a lot of funding across our gas tax revenues, our HERF gas tax revenues, which are traditionally used for our residential streets. We have 4,000 miles of residential streets across our city. Then we also have Transportation 2050 funding that's used for pavement maintenance as well. Those are directed at our arterial and our major collector streets, which we have about 800 miles of those. You may know that over the last 4+ years, we've been working on a 5-year, $200 million accelerated pavement maintenance program that was Transportation 2050 focused. So we use Transportation 2050 2050 monies to be able to improve the condition of our arterials and our major collectors. The main focus and purpose of this GEO bond program potentially was to be able to do something similar that we weren't able to do with the residential streets. And so the funding in there is completely scalable, but if we don't have that funding in the GEO bond program, we would be using our HER funds that we have available to be able to try to tackle as much residential street paving as possible. So that covers the alternative funding sources that we have identified currently in our 5-year capital improvement program. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Comments or questions? Yes, Pam.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to ask this question right, but the Vision Zero program, we're trying to invest to achieve this Vision Zero status certification, or whatever we would call it. Do you have a view of where we are now? Is there a score? From a relativity perspective, where are we, and what would this investment move us to Vision Zero certification?
Madam Chair, subcommittee members, I would say that the best answer, I'd say the Vision Zero schedule we have that we got adopted by our council laid out a vision of driving to zero fatalities on our roadways by 2050. So it is a long-term vision. There are interim milestones to get there. In preparation for our work on this, we put together what was called a high injury network, which denotes a number of intersections and roadway corridors that have a higher incidence of roadway fatalities on them. So we have those projects identified. We have those locations identified. So the more funding we have allocated to be able to work towards that, whether that's local funding or bond program funding or federal funding, it gives us a better opportunity to be able to take care of those countermeasures and make those intersections, roadway corridors safer sooner.
Comments? Questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Actually, I have a few. Good morning. And as was mentioned earlier, I was negotiating labor agreements here, and I'm intimately aware of the Streets Department. But I have some questions that you may or may not be able to answer that I have regarding the city streets. I always think of the city streets as going from Phoenix to the city of San Francisco, because that's what was described to me originally. I mean, there's thousands of miles. I think you said 4,000?
We have a total of 5,000 miles of streets, but 4,000 of them are residential streets.
And through that with the storm drainage, which I'm also aware of, it's last on the priority list, and maybe the chair of the subcommittee can answer. Why is that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your
question.
question.
Why is the drainage last on this list of projects?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the staff provided a survey to the committee to ask them to prioritize, and based on that vote, that's where the prioritization landed.
Do you remember why, by chance?
Say that again?
You remember why?
No, they didn't provide.
I don't remember. I watched the subcommittee meetings, and I don't remember.
It was just a survey, an electronic survey, so there was no give and take on the reason why.
So one thing which they know, I'm a little scattered. The ones across the table from me are accustomed to the way my brain works. But in terms of USDOT funding for federal funding, you said federal funding was included. Streetlights happens to be a conversation I had a few weeks ago with an undersecretary, and I'm not sure why. But they have a lot of free money for street light bulbs throughout the nation. But when you mentioned federal funding, was it through that or in matching funds? Not for light bulbs, Keeney, just in general.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the federal funding we were talking about specifically was about the Vision Zero implementation. We're pursuing $30 million through what's called the Safe Streets for All grant program. We expect to hear February of 2023 whether we receive that. But it will include a number of different measures. Could be streetlights, it could be modernized traffic signals, other safety measures to be able to address both intersections and roadway corridors that are included in that grant.
I can just jump in as well. As you, many of you may know, the federal government passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act about a year ago. And so there are actually hundreds of categories of infrastructure pots of money that are available. So we, the city, will be continuing to pursue every available dollar at the federal level within that infrastructure funding. Those tend to come out in different buckets. They come out in different programs. And so we have to for the competitive dollars, submit an application for a specific project. And so where those opportunities come available, not only for Vision Zero, but for the equity-based transportation mobility projects is another example. And then in some cases, there's also money available for flood hazard mitigation projects as well. And so we'll be seeking those dollars as well.
Other discussion? Pam?
This is a process question. Your point about federal funds is, I think, an important point. And I'm wondering if there is the ability through this process to almost create a if-then type of scenario where we approve a budget as is, but then we've got, if we get federal funding of $30 million for this project, the next one that wasn't approved gets moved up. Is that a possibility?
Chairman Harper and members of the committee, Pam, what I would say to that is it'd probably be very difficult to do that, just because of the timing of when those grant awards would come out, on top of the fact that once you guys make your recommendation to the council, we've got a very quick turnaround then to start working on the form of the ballot. So I think what I would say to that, and I'd let Kenny and Mario, amplify or add on, is what Kenny is talking about is, in many cases, a plan to get to the finish line by a certain date, and in that, there's a huge need. And so what I'm saying is I'm not saying that the funding isn't necessarily needed by streets. I'm just saying that we have to acknowledge that there are other resources to play, and that we will have multiple bond programs to kind of effectuate getting to the finish line. And I don't know if you would add anything to that.
Thank you, Jeff. That's right on point. It would be very difficult to do that. And again, the federal dollars are spread out over a 5-year period as well, starting over this last year. So there's another 4 years of that to go. So it's not like we will know right away whether any of these projects are going to get that level of funding. But it's a great question.
Madam Chair. Rick. I'm just trying to think out loud with the math that we've just presented ourselves with, which is, to get to the target that we're talking about, it's like $40 million, I think is the number. Is that right? Something like that. And so I want to understand the impact of different ways of getting there. My view is we want to really honor the prioritization that the subcommittees did and not pick, not reprioritize, given all the work that they have done and put into the process. So, my brain initially goes to, okay, what's on the bottom of the list? But even if you completely cut items 5 and 6, the Hohokam drainage program and the storm drain replacement program, which is citywide, that adds up to $33 million and change with my math. So even cutting those last 2 items is not enough. And so, maybe the answer is you cut, I'm just throwing out ideas, I don't even know. You cut those 2 programs and then you proportionally cut the rest of the things that could be proportionally cut. That would certainly respect the subcommittee's prioritization. That being said, there may be an argument to leave some money in those projects if there are matching funds associated with those projects. But to me, I wouldn't want to disregard the prioritization of the subcommittee as we go through the cut process. And I'd be interested in both the staff's reaction to something like that, as well as the chairman's reaction, because I'm just trying to do math here, not having sat on the subcommittee, and it seems to me that whole programs probably have to be cut, and not just scaling everything based upon what you said.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
To that point, sorry, Mario.
Go ahead.
We were not able to qualitatively prioritize, right? So we just did it based on sort of an optic that was fairly linear, right? So if you take, for example, the Levine flood mitigation project, and you take the Hohokam drainage program, those two alone are not really scalable. Well, technically they probably are, but practically they are not. But we also receive a considerable amount of match money. So while I'm grateful and appreciative of your concept of the prioritization, that obviously lies with the executive committee on how we want to consider those. And if we look at it from simply the match standpoint, those two projects have pretty good promise as it relates to the least amount of impact on the decision-making process here with the most amount of benefit.
That's valuable. Staff?
Yeah,
Yes,
Madam Chair,
Mario.
my response to that was going to be along those same lines. Just, I think that's a very logical way to approach the cuts, is to start from the bottom up. But in this case, that number 5 project, the Hohokam drainage project, is one of those flood mitigation projects that would actually be done by the Flood Control District of Maricopa County, where they're matching 65% onto our 35%. So we're only paying about 1/3 of the cost of the total project. And you may recall that the city manager recommended that those be kept within the executive committee's recommendation ultimately. So that's one consideration I'd like you to take into account as you approach how to get down to that target.
I think that's very valuable discussion. We've talked about match. We've talked about other funding. Could I ask the subcommittee chairman to see how you might recommend prioritizing if to get to the goal, taking all of this into consideration and considering these two match projects as being really number 1 and 2 because of the funds that they bring?
You're asking me to negotiate against myself.
Well, we know, well, let me just re-articulate.
I'm just trying to keep it light, Madam Chair.
Let me re-articulate. We know what the goal is. We really value the discussion of the committee and your subcommittee, and so I think your insight would be helpful here.
And David, if I may, to offer a little bit of assistance, whatever you decide, if I heard you guys correctly in saying that my targets are going to be somewhat fungible at the end here. You're going to be able to shift things around, right? So my suggestion, David, if you had to get to my number today, right, and then knowing that there could be some opportunity to add back, where would you want to add back if you had to scale down? That to me is how I would recommend that we approach it.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, being put in a very awkward position here. Let me tell you the reason why. Because I think we need to look at the aggregate program. As you move through the process, right, there may be other items in other subcommittees that may have a lower priority, right? And so to take these in these separate silos, to me, doesn't consider the broad spectrum of the entire program. So that's just my opinion. Our subcommittee made this recommendation. Our subcommittee was deliberative. Our subcommittee worked hard to get to our original number. The city manager has his recommendation. The committee has adopted that recommendation. Myself and Mary Rose, in a matter of being magnanimous, affirmed that with a caveat that we look at everything as being movable. So that's really where I would stand as your subcommittee chair.
Madam Chair, so I would like to ask staff if definitely taking the top 6 that the committee brought forward, what I'd like to know is, based on what the city manager and staff has shared about the federal funding, the amount of staff, what can actually be done within the next 5 years, and then knowing that there's another bond program, can we say that with 3 and 5 fully funded because of the matching funds, how can we move forward with like a phase 1 and a phase 2 to actually equal that 81.5 million. So with the Vision Zero, what are those first projects? How much would that give us all the way down to 6 storm drain? How much and what can we do as a start to get to that 81.5 million? Again, taking into consideration the subcommittee, what they need, what we know can be done, and the potential with phase 2 with federal funding, and also starting with the bond for the next 5 years. Is that possible?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, given that there's a number of ways to come at this, I suppose that, given that projects 3 and 5 would remain, and if you're starting from that point, the storm drain replacement program is the number 6 project, the lowest priority on the list. So eliminating that program could be a source of $14 million to get toward these cuts. Then the other projects, as we mentioned, are very scalable, and so you could just work from a percentage basis to get down to the level you need. The pavement maintenance, I would just give some additional context there. So there are, as you know, 8 districts, citywide, 8 council districts, and one of the thoughts there is that doing a project in each district, accounting for the road conditions, of course, primarily, but also trying to spread that out equitably across the city to make sure that we're doing projects in each of the districts, gives us, with the $35 million that's there now, gives us the ability to do about 1 project in each of the districts for 4 years. So each of those is about $1 million each, and I'll have Keeney further explain this. But that's one thing that I would like to maybe point out, is that there's some, it's scalable, very scalable, but there's some method to that madness as well.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I didn't want to mention specifically about the pavement maintenance supplement. I mentioned in my opening comments there that we are coming out of a 5-year, $200 million accelerated pavement maintenance program. We are on schedule, actually ahead of schedule in doing that, and that's, if you do the math on that, it's $40 million a year in additional pavement maintenance that we were asked to do. We've delivered on that. It's a strong partnership. We have the industry. Industries are the ones who perform this work, and I have 100% confidence whatever the committee recommends from a pavement maintenance supplement, we will perform and we will execute. When you talk about the other ones, Vision Zero or equity-based transportation or even the storm drain replacement, those are obviously what the city manager talked about. We have capacity needs within our staff and to be able to deliver. And we'll work through to be able to deliver whatever the bond program includes and try to do and work to do that on time. But I would tell you, I think when you're talking about the pavement maintenance supplement, even though it may be scalable, that was the one I have from a delivery perspective. I know I have 100% confidence whatever is in there, we will deliver. Then I'll also just mention on the Vision Zero implementation and the equity-based transportation mobility, even though those are in there as $26 million and $20 million currently, respectively, those are ones that, as I mentioned, we have needs out there. We have a schedule out there to be able to get to Vision Zero. So whatever, if those are scalable down, if those are to be able to get to the city manager's recommendations, we will work with whatever is in there to be able to apply, whether that's using that as a local match for federal funding opportunities or pursuing locally funded projects using that. But yeah, so, and if you're asking me from a staff perspective, I think my number one goal, actually my two number one goals, kind of side by side, are maintenance of our current assets and safety improvements on our roadways. Those are the two things that I want to focus most as director of the Street Transportation Department. So I think all of these are very valuable programs, and we worked with our best on the Street and Storm Drain subcommittee members to be able to balance their needs from a public's perspective along with ours. But I'll leave a lot up to the committee chair maybe to add anything else to that.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Stephanie.
follow-up question, mostly for the subcommittee chair. When you prioritize projects, could you explain the reasoning behind? Was it based on most critical needs, what just cannot be deferred, or how did you create your prioritized list?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as I mentioned before, the survey was done, first of all, to create the framework, right? And then the other issue that was extremely important to the committee was whether there was a match or whether there was additional funding. What this list doesn't include is we already dropped off one category. What was that category? Do you remember, Kenny? Do you remember?
It was the neighborhood traffic mitigation program. So that was a whole program that was in the prioritized capital needs that the committee eliminated.
And we dropped that. But like I said before, the committee wasn't given an opportunity to amend. Well, we sort of were, but we did not amend the prioritization based on additional criteria. We took the raw data from the survey and kept it in that order. But obviously, because of the opportunity for matches, this committee can look at it and prioritize differently.
Other questions?
Madam
Comments?
Chair, I just want to, in restating what I said earlier and applying it to what the staff just said, I'm just very concerned about not respecting the prioritization of the subcommittee in this case. And you know, the chair has to help us through that. But, you know, it sounds to me like the staff would say, well, let's fund pavement maintenance fully and cut the number 1 and number 2 priorities of the committee, which were Vision Zero implementation and equity-based transportation mobility. And I'm just a little concerned that the subcommittee, after spending 4 meetings and lots of presentations and lots of study, I really do want to respect, to the extent we can, the prioritization. So maybe those things get cut, but I wouldn't recommend cutting the number 1 thing the same percentage as cutting the number 4 thing, as an example, if they're all scalable. And so, I mean, just as a broad framework, there may be good reasons why we'll end up doing something like that, but I'm just a little concerned about that because the committee heard these recommendations from the staff. They digested all the material and they set priorities. And again, those priorities are not set in stone either, but I want to make sure we're respecting them and not just starting anew and inserting our judgment unless there's some overriding reason to, I guess, for citywide equity or balance or things like that.
Well, I'm not sure you agreed that they were prioritized. They were all almost equally important from your perspective and from the committee. I think now we have the task of reducing the amount. I thought it was valuable to hear from the city manager, the city staff about the matching funds. I think that's really important. I think you've shared that as well. I think then the scalable projects, getting a % on those, but we do want to move forward to getting somewhere in the range of what this goal is, and perhaps below that line, is there something we can come back to as we get through the rest of the committee meetings might be a possibility.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Neymark's point, that cat is out of the bag. We have accepted the recommendation of the city manager. The subcommittee's prioritization that we had as far as our recommendation has been dismantled. So we're quite frankly ready to roll our sleeves up and get this done. So I think everything needs to be considered. I think staff's weighted opinion on certain programs need to be respected. And I know the committee went through the prioritization process. I get that. But it's our job to reconfigure if we have to in much the same fashion that the city manager has already done so.
Other comments, questions?
Madam Chair, if I may, I guess I didn't finish explaining my point earlier about the pavement maintenance, which is that if you were to look at a cut in that area, $35 million covers the ability to do 4 years of a residential neighborhood project pavement within each of 8 council districts. If you were to reduce that, one approach could be to look at doing 3 years instead of 4. And so you'd have 8 projects. They're approximately $1 million each. Over a 3-year period, brings that down to about $24 to $25 million, just estimating off the top of my head. And so that could be an area of initial cut if you were to look at the pavement maintenance area to cut off a chunk there. And so the other two, the equity-based transportation mobility and Vision Zero, being a higher priority by the subcommittee, I think that could give you the ability to maybe reduce a little bit less from those two percentage-wise than from the pavement maintenance area.
Thanks for that clarification. That helped my thinking about it because I interpreted it differently.
Madam Chair, may I ask a process question? Are we intending to deliberate subcommittee by subcommittee, or will we hear on every subcommittee the scalable, the alternative funds before we deliberate?
I think what we are presenting is to go committee by committee and get into the priorities, try to get those numbers to what the recommendation is, respecting all of the input from the staff, opportunities for matching funds, other outside funds, respecting what the subcommittees have come up with, but knowing we as a body need to get this to the budget. So what I would like to do for this particular subcommittee is, and I want to ask staff to do this, if you would put together and share with us what you think these numbers could look like. I'd like all of us to hear that. I think it's been a little confusing for those who aren't part of the subcommittee to understand exactly the cuts, the percentages, the scalability, the equity, matching, all of that. So if we could get a recommendation based on this discussion to get us to the recommended budget, I think that would be helpful for all of us to listen to, and then that would be something we would vote on. But again, we're going to come back after we get through all 8 committees to have an overall discussion once again. Thank you.
Let's move this thing. Let's see if we can get this squared away. What I would recommend, Madam Chair, starting the conversation, is that the Executive Committee recommend approval of the Hohokam Drainage Program and the Levine Flood Mitigation Project. And I make a motion to that effect. And then we can start working our way through the scalable projects and prioritize those. So my motion would be to accept the Levine Flood Mitigation Project and the Hohokam Drainage Program.
Do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? Those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you. So share those numbers so everybody has those.
Okay, so now we have the scalable pieces, Madam Chair. I would recommend this is very hard because the storm drainage program, the firefighters can't get to their location unless they can get there, right? So it's very, very difficult. So with that said, can I have Mario and Kenny, can we talk about the storm drain replacement program and whether or not, if we were to cut that would be making progress toward our goal, and whether or not we can navigate through some of that with existing funding?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, just specifically with the storm drain program, so just to give you an idea, that originally started out about a $28 million program. because, and to give you an idea what this is we have a number of older storm drain lines throughout the city that were made with corrugated metal back in the mid-'80s up to the early '90s. Those have deteriorated over the last 30 years, and so when you see a sinkhole in the news, whether it's at an intersection or along a roadway corridor where we had to close it down, 9 times out of 10 that's happening because of a failure in one of those lines. So we have been dealing these on a reactive basis, going in and improving those. What the intent was to go in and do an assessment citywide of those storm drains and do a risk assessment and going to repair or replace those lines based on that risk assessment. So that, because of the upfront assessment work we were going to do, use the first 2 to 3 years of doing that assessment, and then the final 3 to 4 or 5 years of the program to actually start doing implementation projects. So that's why we knocked it down to $14 million. If there's a desire to move this down, I think the assessment is still necessary. So we could probably look at $2 to $3 million as to do that assessment, and then take out the implementation money and put that towards a future potential bond program.
To that point, Madam Chair, then I would recommend that we cut the storm drain replacement program another $10 million. Does the $4.3 million, Kenny, get you the revenue needed for the assessment?
Yes, it would.
Is that too much, or would you like me to scale that back to 3?
I would say respectfully that if you said cutting it back $10 million, I think if we cut it back to $2.5 million, we'll be okay with that.
Okay, Madam Chair, with that, I would recommend the storm drain replacement program be capped at $2.5 million, with the remaining going to the effort of getting to the 81.5. And that's a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
What's our total now?
We still have $42.2 million to cut to get to the 81.5, if my math's correct.
We started at 42.599, right? We've cut 12, so we're at 30.
I'll let Kenny do the math. You do the math.
Is that right? 30?
What was the question, Mr. Martin?
Is the running total now 29.9 or 30, as Dave mentioned?
$30 million is what's in that the executive committee has adopted. 30 million includes the Levine flood mitigation project, the Hohokam drainage project, and the $2.5 million for the storm drain assessment. Another way to look at it would be you've got $51 million left to be able to include in a recommendation to get to the city manager's target.
We could do a weighted cut, proportional, on the last 3 remaining programs, provided they're viable. So whatever that percentage is of the 50, what did you say, 51? We have, in order to get to that 51, figure out what the weighted average cut is for each of those and cut them evenly on a weighted basis. Do you follow me, what I'm saying? And that'll get you to your 81.5. And when any other programs down the line have additional funding, we're going to put them back in. See, I have sense of humor.
Could we just hear from staff on the question?
I'd probably, the approach that Mario had outlined previously with the pavement maintenance supplement, the $35 million that's in there right now, that would allow us to do 7 residential quarter sections per year over the 5 years of the program, so that would give you 35. There's options there. If, as Mario was talking about, we have 8 council districts. Now, when we put our pavement maintenance programs out there, we do that based on need, not just geographic, spread. We look at need first, then we geographically spread it so that we have a equitable distribution of those pavement projects across the city. Now, you have an option to be able to look at it doing 8 of those quarter section residential ones over 4 years, so 32 total. Or you could do, as Mario's outlined, 3 years of those 8 programs at $24 million. So those are 2 options to reduce the pavement maintenance supplement down by either approximately $3 million or $11 million.
Madam Chair, I was just recommending if we did it on the weighted cut that we recommend, does it get you to your 3 or 2? I'm sorry, I'm not going through the chair. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Mr. Martin, so if we were to go to $24 million for the pavement maintenance, which gets you 3 years of projects in each district, and then about approximately the same percentage, around the 60 to 62% range is what you would need for all 3 of them if you applied to the Vision Zero and to the equity transportation, would put you at about 16 million for Vision Zero and about 12 million for equity-based transportation. I think that's about $52 million between the 3 of them. 16 million and 12 and 24 together gets. I'm just doing math by hand here, so hopefully I'm doing this right. But if it's correct, $52 million is right almost at the 51.5 remaining to get you to the 81.5.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, what I'm trying to get at is the proportions remain the same for the contributions, and that the proportion of 26, 20, and 35 as it relates to the aggregate number remains the same, but the cuts are based on that weighted amount of each of the categories. And they're doing the math, so that would be my recommendation, and that's implementable. Mario?
Yes.
Madam Chair, clarification question. What would the cut then be to the equity-based transportation mobility? Just looking at the alternate funding, that has much, much less than the pavement maintenance and even the Vision Zero, and just want to make sure we're not cutting that too deeply.
Mm-hmm. 12 million, is that right, Mario?
We'd cut $8 million down to 12.
I think equity is a priority for all of us through this bond program, and I know it is of the city manager as well. That feels like too deep of a cut to the equity-based program. And there's $351 million in the maintenance alternate funding. Wonder if we can't discuss that further.
Comments to that from staff?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think that's really all of these are important, and we want to recognize the priorities. So I guess I would just say one thought there is that Mr. Martin suggested the equalized cuts between those remaining programs. You could do it a different way where it's not the same level of cuts because of that prioritization. If what I'm saying makes sense, where we do a little bit less of a percentage to the higher priority programs and a little bit higher percentage to the lower. That's just a different way to do it, but that's a call of the executive committee.
My goal was to make it an equal cut across the board proportionately, with the understanding that that pavement maintenance would have the largest cut out of it.
If you did it, Madam Chair, if you did it equally, what's the cut to pavement maintenance? Equal percentages?
Well, what would they say? 61% of that?
13.3.
So 40%.
So that gets you to 20, what is that? 22 million, is that right? 22, 23 million?
I can't read that.
Easy math. If I had my Excel spreadsheet, I could do it really quickly.
Yeah.
Is it a 40% cut across the board? Is that right? Approximately.
So the pavement maintenance is a percentage-wise a higher cut as proposed to get to
Right.
24 million.
Yes.
Than the others. It's about, what did we?
Yeah, that was the
about
intent.
30%, whereas the others, what did we say? It was about 38%. Okay. So I haven't done this math, but I'm being told it was about 38% for the pavement maintenance, and the others was a more like what was the amount, the percentage?
I'm sorry, Mario. You're calculating the 38% on the basis of going 3, right?
You're asking us to take the 81 million, which is those 3 projects, correct, Dave? And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
You're asking us to take the $81 million, which constitute those 3 projects. What do we have to effectively cut across the board to get to the 51 that's remaining?
Correct.
That's what you're asking, right?
It's right, and I
37.2.
recommended that we do it on a weighted basis.
Okay.
It's about 37.2% is from taking it down from 82 million, 81 million that the city manager talked about down to $51.5 million is what they have left to be able to program within the 81.5 total.
And as a result of that, what is the number for pavement maintenance?
Approximately 13.3 would be
reduction, correct?
That would be the reduction. So 13.3 down from 35. So
what's left?
22.
22. Okay, so that gets to about the number that Mario was discussing for doing some projects over a few years in council districts.
So if you made that 24, that would be the equal way of doing that.
Right. As I said, I think my preference would be to not cut things equal percentage based upon the ranking, but I respect your trying to get to some number that is reasonable, and I also respect the chair's opinion as the leader of his committee. So I'm sort of with Devney. I'm worried about those other categories. They're not traditional categories, by the way. Those are new ventures sort of for us as a city to be focused instead of being focused on how smooth the ride is and how nice our driving surfaces are, to instead be focused on things like, gee, this neighborhood, you have to walk in the street to get to a bus stop, or these bike lanes are unsafe, and how do you make them safer? And so obviously you got to do both those things. But I'm assuming that's why the committee ranked them in the way they did, but I don't really know.
Madam Chair, I would just add to Rick's comments that is the demonstration of a critical need. I think that's a perfect example of what's truly more of a critical need. And being a newer program, if you cut it by 12 million, does that program even really get off the ground? Does it really have an impact in the neighborhoods that so desperately need that?
I think the cut, Devney, just to be clear, was an $8 million cut, taking it down to $12 million.
Madam Chair, to that point, does that move the needle on those programs?
Yes, it does.
I completely agree with the committee. If it doesn't move the needle, then we need to rethink it. But if it moves the needle, then I'm comfortable. I was going to wait till staff had the final number so I could put it into a concrete motion. If you want me to do that, Madam Chair, more than happy to do that if you have those figures yet.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think the final numbers for those, as displayed on the screen, if you can read those, it's about $16,647,159 for Vision Zero implementation. That's a reduction from the $26.7 million. For equity-based transportation, it would be $12,570,371. That's a reduction from the 20.1 number. And then finally, pavement maintenance supplement would be $22,030,869, which is a reduction from the 35.3 number.
Madam Chair, I make that motion with the following caveat. Because we're doing this in silos, and to myself and Mary Rose's point, that as we move down the timeline of these various silos, that if we find ourselves in a position that we're cutting non-scalable projects that leave additional funding that can backfill these three programs. Obviously, we don't need to worry about that, about the programs in Levine, but that we consider that as we move forward so that we're not locking ourselves into this specific allocation, and the committee would recommend, if necessary, to backfill some of those important programs.
Thank you. That's a good clarification to that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just one thing that I would like to ask the staff to follow up on, if we could, to see if there's any way we can shave a little bit off of those discrete drainage projects, the Hohokam and the Levine, so we could put a little more money into some of these safety-focused programs. You don't have to answer today if you want to go back and think about it. Just if you could squeeze a little bit out of those project numbers on our side of things, then we're creating more ability to fund equity-based programs and Vision Zero implementation. That's just if they say no, I'm fine with the answer, but I'd like to hear the answer after some looking at it.
I think that makes sense, and when we come back, after we get through all of the committee structure, we want to be sure we have those bullet points and comments from staff. So if that's an opportunity, we can rediscuss it.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, to answer committee member Neymark's question also, is obviously we're in a period of a lot of inflationary growth right now, and so these are distinct projects. So the concern I have there is whether we're going to be able to proceed. We actually might lose projects out of that if we trim too much out of that.
Thank you. Other comments before we call for the vote? Those in favor of that motion, it's been seconded, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So I want to thank you and your committee and the work that we've done here with everyone to do things that are very difficult to get this number where it needs to go. We'll have this flexibility to address it on a broader picture when we come back in summary after all of the committees. So thank you. We're next going to move on to neighborhoods and city services. Thank you. We are now going to discuss neighborhoods and city services. Abraham, may I ask you to take the lead on this?
Absolutely. Our whole goal was, the whole intent was to have 3 buckets: libraries, city facilities, and historic preservation. And I would like very much to hold on to these 3 items as we move forward, if possible. I know that we will have to shave some funding off, but libraries are very important within the city of Phoenix. And I think that, of course, libraries are the one thing that we can all agree upon. I know there's fire, there's the police, but I would probably be, sharing my bias, but I think that libraries are above police and fire. So with that, I will pass it on to the staff if you have any presentations that you would like to give. But in any event, in my brief analysis of the information that is given, that we try our best in order to mold this in such a way that we do reflect the 3 buckets in which we have identified moving forward.
Thank you very much. May I turn this over to city staff?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, one thing I do want to point out in regards to this particular program area, the target as approved by the committee as recommended by the city manager is the $45 million. As you can see, based off of how the subcommittee ranked the priority projects, that would accommodate for projects 1 through 5. Projects 6 and 7 for the city service center property improvements and downtown property improvements. The general fund right now in the budget has an amount of $13 million that's in the major maintenance category that is used as supplemental funding to do center improvements. What we could do as we move forward over the next few years is to identify if there's capacity in the general fund to increase that amount to try to accommodate some increased level of property improvements to accommodate 6 and 7. So I just want to mention that as you continue deliberating and discussing that for this particular program area, you could get to your targets by 1 through 5, and then we can work over the budget cycle over the next few years to increase the amount to accommodate projects 6 and 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Would the city's staff like to make comments on these now, these priorities?
Madam Chair, to the discussion that occurred earlier regarding scalable versus non-scalable, the library projects, items 1, 3, and 4 are projects, and the rest of the items on the subcommittee's priority list are programs, and as we discussed in the subcommittee, those are somewhat scalable. So there is that factor to consider as well. And then, of course, we did provide information regarding other funding sources. Amber did cover with respect to the city facilities that those are that the general funds and the CIP are the other funding sources.
Any comments or questions from the members of the committee?
I have one.
Please.
Madam Chair, I do have a question on number 2, the ADA improvements. I think as we listened to other presentations, I had written a note here that the Phoenix Theater Company was brought up, I think, here and then another area. Is that still, and I wrote on here that the Phoenix Theater Company wouldn't need this particular allocation from this subcommittee because they're in another one? If that's the case, how would that be scalable?
Madam Chair, committee members, good morning. Joe Giudice, Public Works Director. Yes, this was addressed At the Arts and Culture Committee, as well as at the Neighborhoods and City Services Subcommittee, the ADA program that's identified here is not earmarking dollars to any specific project. Rather, there is an assessment currently underway led by our Equal Opportunity Department in combination with our Public Works Department, going through city facilities and identifying deficiencies with respect to ADA accommodations. The objective of this program would be able to have a funding source to be able to invest in improvements based on the deficiencies identified during those, and it would be prioritized based on the most significant needs that were discovered during those assessments. I think the assessments are currently underway, maybe in their first year, and they're anticipated to take place over the course of the next couple of years. So this program would make investments in those assessments.
Thank you. And as follow-up, so for what I'm seeing in what was recommended, if the subcommittee chair wanted to recommend moving forward with 1 through 5, it would get to, keeping the ADA at the same amount, it would get to the $45 million, with 6 and 7 having other funding sources. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a comment. I'm glad you brought up the Phoenix Theater, and it's a prioritized project through the Arts and Culture Subcommittee because it was not a project that could be committed to this bond program through the Neighborhood Subcommittee. We know that there are more needs than $10 million, and $5 million of that 10 going towards one project, I think from our Public Works Director's perspective, is not what they would recommend at this point. So it is why we included it within Arts and Culture, but to be able to move it to this bucket of funding would certainly be very welcome, as it is a prioritized project and really should be of all of ours, again, as we look at accessibility and equity within our city.
Madam Chair, just one quick question. The operating costs associated with particularly the Yucca branch expansion, but there's also one there for Desert View. Is that something the city staff believes you can absorb as we go through the next 5 years when those things open?
Madam Chair, Member Naymark, members of the committee, yes, we would be looking to incorporate any net new ongoing operating expenses into the forecast as we move forward. Those don't come with a considerable amount. So I would be comfortable assuming that the general fund, we can build that in as those projects would come online.
Great. Thank you.
Could I ask Subcommittee Chairman to respond to the idea of shifting additional dollars to ADA, and if so, if you'd be interested in that, how would that still get us to $45 million here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will probably need the assistance of the staff in order to show this in, but I do agree with if we were to move fundings from one area, take fundings out of other areas in order to reflect the amount that we are seeking, which is $49 million.
I think the recommendation from staff is that items 6 and 7 would be funded through the general fund, through its operating budget and its maintenance fund.
Okay.
And so you would fund everything as presented and recommended 1 through 5.
Okay, great. Well, I do agree with that.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion that we use the information that is given, the ranking that we have from 1 through 5, as part of our funding as we move forward, as we have it right now.
Second.
Is there?
Second. Conversation, comments?
Madam Chair, what is the difference in those? Is there some excess funding left?
There may be a little bit, not much. That's $10 million taken off 6 and 7, and their target was $45 million. So I think we're pretty much right there, Dave.
Is that $1 million or $2 million that can go into?
I don't think there's anything there.
Vision.
No.
Vision Zero.
Good try. I don't think there's anything.
That was the caveat on my amendment. Was that we rolled excess revenue into those other categories.
I think it's $300,000 rounding.
Okay, we'll roll it in.
So can we confirm that we're at 45 million?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as confirmed on the screen, it's at 44.6 million.
So that rounds up to 45.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Don't blame me for trying.
Actually, an additional comment towards this discussion. If there is some change, if we could put it into the ADA improvements, again, we know that the city has more needs than what is allocated here, and we should put whatever pennies we can towards that line item, if it's within the subcommittee.
Thank you, and we'll add that and have that discussion again.
Just a process question. I did not think any of the committees would have money left over. Shouldn't that money drop to the bottom line, and then we can look and see?
That would be my recommendation, especially considering that we're still undergoing the assessments on the ADA stuff, so we really don't know what the scale and scope of that is, as well as how much can we actually get done. To the same point that we had the conversation with David, how much can we get done? And I think we did make a commitment to, the motion was to look at what's left over and see where it was best applied holistically.
Yeah, I would prefer that, because if dropped to the bottom line, there may be a committee that just needs maybe 200, maybe, just a little bit less. So if we could do that with all committees, it'd probably be a lot better.
Thank you. I'm going to call for the vote. Those in favor of the motion, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. Thank you very much.
Great.
I think now at this stage of the meeting, we're going to go to public comment. We have quite a few people who have signed up to speak, and we want to, as we have in the past, make this as open to the public as possible. We will be having subsequent meetings and going through the same process with each of the remaining subcommittees. So as we go into the public comment period, I would like to ask the city attorney to please explain the rules of public comment in the Go Bond Committee.
Yes, Patty Boland. Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee, members of the public may speak to comment on the General Obligation Bond Program. The City Code requires speakers to present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, council members, committee members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose the opportunity to continue to speak. The committee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending claims or litigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 40 speakers who have registered today, including 12 virtual, 28 here in person. When your name is called, your audio device will be unmuted and you'll begin your remarks. I'm going to ask the staff to now please coordinate the calls and the speakers. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just want to confirm the amount of time for each speaker is, earlier you said 3 minutes, but are we switching that to 1 or 2 now? 1 minute, okay, thank you. Okay, our first virtual speaker who will require Spanish assistance is Brenda Montoya, followed by Paolo Valencia. Brenda, are you on the line?
Yes, I am the line. Buenos días. Voy a usar la interpretación, por favor.
I will be needing interpretation. Aquí estamos en la línea. Adelante.
Ok, gracias. Buenos días para todos.
Good morning to all.
Mi nombre es Brenda Montoya.
My name is Brenda Montoya.
Pertenezco al Distrito 7 en Estrella Village.
And I belong to District 7 in Estrella Village.
Soy miembro de Si Se Puede Neighborhood Association.
I'm a member of Si Se Puede Neighborhood Association.
En nombre de mi comunidad estoy aquí
And I am here in the name of my community,
apoyando para que se construya un parque regional en la 99 Avenida y Laurel Buckeye.
supporting that there would be a park constructed in the 99th Avenue and Levine area. 99 y Levine,
Donde la
perdón?
comunidad 99 Avenida y Laurel Buckeye.
Lower Buckeye, perdón. 99th Avenue and Lower Buckeye. I apologize for that. Adelante.
La comunidad está creciendo
The community is growing.
y contar con un parque donde las familias puedan realizar actividades al aire libre
And having an area or a park with families can come together outside.
También tener una librería servirá para que los niños tengan oportunidades de interactuar y aprender.
And having a library would be beneficial to the children to be able to have a place to get together, interact, and learn.
Dentro de esta infraestructura, tener un centro comunitario
And within this infrastructure, having a community center
apoyará a las personas en la comunidad
to support the people of the community
a que tengan mejores oportunidades, interactuar, impartir talleres y distribuir despensas y mucho más.
in order for the community to come together, to interact, to offer trainings, and be able to distribute any goods.
Thank you. Our next virtual speaker is Paola Valencia, followed by Laura Lopez. Oh, and Paola Valencia will require Spanish interpretation.
Paola, ¿se encuentra en la línea?
Sí, aquí me encuentro.
Adelante.
Buenos días para todos. Mi nombre es Paola Valencia.
Good morning,
y
everyone. My name is Paola Valencia.
Pertenezco al distrito 7 en Estrella Village.
And I am from District 7, Estrella Village.
También soy miembro de Si Se Puede Neighborhood Association.
And I'm also a member of Si Se Puede Neighborhood Association.
Y estoy apoyando la construcción del parque regional en la 99 Avenida y Lower Buckeye.
And I'm also supporting the construction in the regional area of 99th Avenue and Lower Buckeye.
Necesitamos más áreas como esas donde se encuentren librerías, centro comunitario, parques y todo eso, porque en nuestra área se está llenando de mucha infraestructura, como bodegas y cosas así. Entonces necesitamos más áreas así de recreacionales.
And what we need in our area is libraries, community centers, parks, because what we're seeing is a lot of infrastructure, such as warehouses. So our community needs more of these recreational infrastructures.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Our next virtual speaker requiring Spanish interpretation is Laura Lopez, followed by Elizabeth Payan.
Laura, ¿se encuentra en la línea?
Sí, aquí me encuentro.
Adelante.
Sí, buenos días. Mi nombre es Laura López, pertenezco al Distrito 7 en el área de Estrella Village. Soy miembro de la Asociación de Si Se Puede Neighborhood. Estoy apoyando.
Good morning. My name is Laura Lopez, and I am from District 7 and Estrella Village, and I'm also a member of Si Se Puede Neighborhood Watch.
Estoy de acuerdo y estoy apoyando a la construcción que siga el parque regional en la 99 Avenida y la Lower Buckeye.
And I am calling to support the construction of the regional park at 99th Avenue and Lower Buckeye.
Ya que en nuestra comunidad no tenemos cerca una biblioteca ni centro comunitario y se nos facilitaría tener cerca uno para la educación de nuestros hijos.
We don't have in our area any community centers, libraries, anything close by where our children can have access to more education.
Lo cual también se les facilitaría a toda nuestra comunidad llevar a nuestros hijos ahí en esa parque si se logra seguir con la construcción y lo cual se desarrollarían físico y emocionalmente.
And it would just make it easier for our community to have a place where our children can go to a park and also give them the opportunity to just better themselves at a physical and mental level.
Y ya que en nuestra área, toda nuestra comunidad, estamos rodeados de muchas bodegas de Amazon y entre otras bodegas, y realmente necesitamos cerca ese parque regional para toda nuestra comunidad, por el bien de nuestros hijos y de nuestros futuros generaciones. Muchas gracias, que tengan bonito día.
And in our area, in the surrounding area, we have a lot of warehouses such as Amazon and others. So we really do need a regional park in our area for their children, for their future and upcoming generations. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.
Our next virtual speaker requiring Spanish interpretation is Elizabeth Payan, followed by Alexandra Papizan.
Elizabeth, ¿se encuentra en la línea?
Sí, aquí estoy.
Adelante.
Sí, hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Elizabeth Payán. Pertenezco a una comunidad de Si Se Puede Neighborhood Association.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Payan, and I am a member of the Si Se Puede del Si Se Puede, ¿cómo se llama, perdón?
Neighborhood Association del Distrito 7.
Neighborhood Association of District 7.
Y estoy aquí, al igual que las compañeras, abogando para que se haga un parque regional por la 99 Avenida y la Lower Buckeye.
And I'm here, like the others, supporting the construction of the regional park at the 99th Avenue and Lower Buckeye.
Esto sería de mucha ayuda para todos los miembros de la comunidad y más que nada para los niños, los adultos, que les sirva para distraerse y a toda la comunidad.
And this would be very beneficial to all the members of the community, including the children and the adults.
Esto sería todo y muchas gracias y que tengan buen día.
And that would be all. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Our next virtual speaker is Alexandra Papisian, followed by Linda Abeg. Alexandra, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Alexandra Papazian. I'm the Director of Operations at Valley, Arizona. You all heard from me last week, and I'm here again in support of the cultural facility condition assessment project in the arts and culture committee recommendation. Our building, as well as the other city-owned buildings that are in that project, are reaching end of life with some of our critical systems like HVAC and power. And we provide essential community arts and culture programming to members of the Phoenix community, as well as all over Arizona and even beyond in other states. We are really looking at some support from this committee. We are so grateful for the recommendation of $5 million on behalf of our buildings. We're really hoping that, as discussions ensue, that we can get closer to the original $10 million proposed. We have critical failures in some of those systems, and it's really imperative that we receive the city's support to fix those things, which are very much outside of our current budget and state of financial support. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Our next virtual speaker is Linda Abeg, followed by Ryan Boyd. Linda, are you on the line?
Yeah.
Okay, you may proceed.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Linda Abeg. I am in District 8. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Levine Village Planning Committee. I'm here to speak in support of the Estrella Civic Space, the park and library. Our area, we're in the same impact fee area as Estrella Village, seeing tremendous growth, but not growth in our infrastructure. And I would love to see Estrella be able to have a place for their children, for their family, that healthy green open space, as well as the library. And even in Levine, where I live, we would be able to benefit from the regional park nearby. So this would be something that would have a wide benefit throughout our community and is really long overdue for our neighbors in Estrella. So I'd ask that you support that and provide the infrastructure that should come along with all of this growth. Thank you.
Our next virtual speaker is Ryan Boyd, followed by Mark Metis. Ryan, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee, my name is Ryan Boyd. Personally, I was going to come on here to support a whole bunch of things for Urban Phoenix Project, including the heat resiliency, the innovation for affordable housing, and the top two items of the Streets and Storm Drainage Subcommittee, the Vision Zero and T2050 mobility. However, with the unfortunate situation that we've kind of witnessed here today, and I apologize for my subcommittee chairman, Mr. Martin, for being put in this kind of crosshair in a no-win situation, it is rather frustrating to have done many, many days of work with staff, with others, to honestly select those high priority items like Vision Zero purposefully. And purposely, he tried to discuss getting those items funded for the safety of streets to have it supplanted by recommendations from management. It's one thing to cut down the size. It's another to completely disregard the work the subcommittee has done. I apologize, but it's just, it's a travesty in my mind, and I hope that we can fund Vision Zero and T2050 as the subcommittee, I think, intended as one of its members. Thank you.
Our next virtual speaker is Mark Metis, followed by Wes Patterson. Mark, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you may proceed.
Good morning. My name is Mark Metis. I'm president of the Herberger Theater Center. I appreciate the comments by our city manager to make sure projects don't add operating expenses. Many of the projects within the Arts and Culture Subcommittee will actually reduce expenses. Right now, there are huge deferred maintenance issues that are coming back to haunt us. We all know when you plan to replace a piece of equipment like an audio console, it's much less expensive than when you have to do it on an emergency basis. The replacement of obsolete equipment at the Herberger Theater Center is one of those projects that are necessary to stop spending staff time trying to keep equipment working that is past its useful life. I urge you to invest bond dollars into this project and the other arts and culture critical maintenance projects for continuity of operations for these arts and culture facilities. The arts create jobs, economic impact, and tax revenue. I urge you to invest in these projects to save expenses and continue that revenue. Thank you for your time.
Our next virtual speaker is Wes Patterson, followed by Jamie Kozemsak. Wes, are you on the line?
Yes, good morning, members of the Executive Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking as a resident of the City of Phoenix in District 1, and also as the chapter president of the Phoenix Fire Command Officers Association. I did speak to the board a couple weeks back. Just want to reiterate, speaking in support of the recommendations of the Public Safety Subcommittee. Simply put, we're behind in our ability to provide excellent service. We feel that the fire department has a high expectation and that the citizens have a high expectation of our service delivery. I put that into perspective a few weeks ago, speaking about the city's ability to keep up with the growth over the years, that we were able to add a number of fire stations through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But since 2011, we've only added one station. And obviously, we've heard about the effects of that, the reduction in the service delivery to our citizens, the extended call times and response times. And I just want to speak in the support of the Public Safety Subcommittee. Thank you for your time today.
Our next virtual speaker is Jamie Kozemczak, followed by Francisca Montoya. Jamie, are you on the line?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Executive Committee. My name is Jamie Kozemczak, the Executive Director of Ballet, Arizona. Thank you for allowing me to speak and advocate on behalf of the constituents we serve in our community and other arts organizations. At the last bond meeting, I spoke to advocate for the projects included in the Arts and Cultural Bond, but was only allowed the brief time to include the patron experience as a benefit. Our breadth of community engagement projects and the additional tax dollars and revenue that result from the arts and cultural sector are also key and critical reasons why the investment of these funds are necessary for arts and cultural organizations to continue their operations smoothly, efficiently, and successfully. As mentioned by other peers in our community, these deferred capital projects are very costly from an operational standpoint, and this investment will be allowing us to reinvest back in our mission and community programs that we offer to our constituents. Thank you for your time.
Our next virtual speaker is Francisca Montoya, followed by Marvin Lobato. Francisca, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good morning. My name is Francisca Montoya, and I live in the Sundance Ranch neighborhood at 83rd Avenue in Lower Buckeye. I've lived here for over 22 years, and still today, our area continues to lag behind with regard to equitable city amenities. I urge you to not continue to leave us behind and to please prioritize the viable Estrella civic space. Thank you so much.
Our next virtual speaker is Marvin Lobato, followed by Jessica Leach in Upper Council Chambers. Marvin, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, and you may proceed.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Marvin Lobato, and I've been a resident of the Estrella Village community for 17 and a half years. I recently retired after serving as the superintendent for Fowler Elementary School District for 14 and a half years. As a City of Phoenix taxpayer, I'm in support of allocating $12.3 million for the Estrella Civic Space with the proposed site of 91st Avenue in Lower Buckeye. The closest City of Phoenix funded parks and recreation facilities for our families and community members are located to the north in Maryvale or to the south and east at Cesar Chavez facilities. Our community has been overlooked, although it continues to grow with many new housing developments and commercial parks. Our children, family, and residents deserve facilities that are accessible. Please consider approving the Estrella Civic Space, and thank you for allowing residents to provide input.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Jessica Leach, followed by Casey Simon.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, the Parsons Center is a city-owned building, and this project has no impact to the general fund and doesn't require city staff. It is a scalable project. What we're looking at doing is expanding space for ourselves, for Valley-Wise, and 1 in 10 to offer much-needed healthcare services, including mental health services, to marginalized communities throughout the Phoenix area. On top of that, we're the only healthcare agency that is part of the GO Bond initiative. And the services we offer deeply impact individuals experiencing homelessness. So when you look at the populations that we serve, a third of our clients have experienced homelessness at some point. 50% live below the federal poverty level, and 80% live slightly above it. So the services that we provide help keep people either in housing or directly impact their ability to get into housing and then to thrive within our community. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Casey Simon, followed by Michael Soto.
Good morning. My name is Casey Simon, the Senior Director of Healthcare Operations at the Southwest Center. Today I'm here to highlight what the Parsons Center for Health and Wellness means to our community. At two recent events, the Phoenix Pride Festival and Pride on the Block, hosted by Councilwoman Ansari, the Southwest Center circulated a survey about the expansion of the Parsons Center. Well, we were able to collect over 450 signatures at those two events, enthusiastically signed in support of this project. In addition, we are also at First Fridays here in Phoenix, and we distribute approximately 20,000 condoms a month to support prevention and wellness. The Parsons Center is a beacon of health and hope for the people across the city of Phoenix, and I urge you to support the investment of our future. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Michael Soto, followed by Dr. Michael White.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Michael Soto, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer for One Community. One Community is a coalition of more than 3,000 socially responsible businesses and organizations and more than 20,000 Arizonans as individuals. Our goal is to create an Arizona that truly celebrates, respects, and protects us all. The Parsons Center for Health and Wellness is a critical resource for people impacted by HIV and AIDS and for the entire LGBTQ community in the city of Phoenix. And we commend the city of Phoenix for your support and vision to create a space that co-locates both healthcare services and support services for LGBTQ people. I'm here today to let this committee know that One Community wholeheartedly supports advancing the Parsons Center expansion to the City Council and ultimately to Phoenix voters. This expansion is a responsible investment and will deliver benefits to the city far beyond the stated goals of increasing HIV and AIDS testing and prevention. It will support a healthy community, a thriving workforce, and help individuals lead more fulfilling lives. We thank you for your support of the LGBTQ community and the Parsons Center.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Dr. Michael White, followed by Selena Quinones.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee. I'm Dr. Michael White. I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer of Valleywise Health. We're here today to support the expansion effort for the Parsons Center. Valleywise Health has been a critical partner in being able to deliver healthcare services within the Parsons Center for the HIV community. We wish to continue to provide these services and need this expanded space to continue to expand our services as we see an ever-growing population of those suffering with HIV and HIV-related illnesses. In addition to this, many of our patients also come to this center for primary and mental health care. We continue to need this space to be able to deliver this and continue to support these needs of these patients. We hope that you will continue and find it to be able to support this initiative and support this bond funding for expansion for the Parsons Center. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Selena Quinones, followed by Steve Oberhansley.
Good morning. My name is Selena Quinones. I am the co-founder of Coach's Closet, a nonprofit organization that works with youth in our community and the importance of sports. I am here to speak in support of a park being put into place in I'm from District 7 Estrella community, and we're here to talk about a park and how great it would be for our community, for our kids, our youth to have a place to go. As a former student or youth and someone who's currently working with youth in the community, it would definitely be a good opportunity for them to get together and a safe place for all the people in our community. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Steve Oberhansley, followed by Tom Cooper.
Good morning. My name is Steve Oberhansley. I've worked at the Phoenix Art Museum for about 15 years, managing the 12-acre property consisting of 9 buildings. that over 60 years have been knitted together, totaling $250,000, I've got finances on my mind, 250,000 square feet of multi-level space. But beneath that facade of beautiful buildings and grounds lies a very modest maintenance budget. I'm here to suggest the critical equipment replacement project be fully funded at $10 million. The Phoenix Art Museum has millions of dollars in deferred maintenance, and other cultural arts properties share this dilemma. We also share limited budgets to care for these facilities, and we all vie for funds to meet everyday essentials, including end-of-life equipment, components, and infrastructure. Public Works and Budget and Research have the daunting task of determining what gets funded and whether it will be on schedule or deferred. Go Bond subsidy helps bridge the gap between monetary shortfall and the capital needed for neglected maintenance items that can take years to be addressed, usually at higher costs. We must meet the mundane yet foundational maintenance needs of all arts and culture facilities. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Tom Cooper, followed by Cindy Gogan.
Good morning. Tom Cooper, Building Maintenance Technician at the Phoenix Art Museum. Here today, of course, to advocate for item number 9 on the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture critical maintenance situation there. Of course, infrastructure is too often overlooked. You're going to hear about that a lot today. I can tell you my 9 years experience at the museum, there's quite a bit that has to be done. I'm sure everybody under the umbrella has the same concerns. Specifically, we have some roofing, some safety concerns with lights, security cameras, down to granite walls in the front entrance that are failing. So I'm positive that everybody else is going to say similar things. Again, just asking for a scalability, possibly for that $5 million to go to $10 million. Just saying. Anyhow, thank you for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Cindy Gogan, followed by Kate Wells.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Executive Committee. Cindy Gogan, Senior Director of Phoenix Community Alliance, and I speak on behalf of our members and our Board of Directors. I only spoke about 3 of our advocacy committees on the last time I was up, so now I have 3 more to speak about. We request maximum funding for historic preservation projects through our Central City Planning and Development and Arts, Culture, and Public Life committees. Please bear in mind that our stock of historic properties and our assets in this regard are rapidly dwindling, and we cannot build new historic properties in the city of Phoenix. We also request maximum funding for acquisition of a second structure for the permanent supportive housing and bridge housing, acquisition, rehabilitation of geographically dispersed non-congregate shelter, and innovations in affordable housing program and gap financing. And I will also advocate for that Vision Zero funding and T2050 funding that Ryan Boyd said he wasn't going to advocate for. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Kate Wells, followed by Allison O'Toole.
Good morning, I'm Kate Wells with the Children's Museum of Phoenix. In advance of the Arts and Culture Committee discussion, hopefully next week, I'd like to share why keeping the Children's Museum project at the committee and staff recommended levels of $5.3 million is important. The Children's Museum's building is 110 years old and was only partially renovated by the city. Because of the way the building is designed, with the rooms stacked and all interconnected, doing anything less than completing the full renovation will cause significant increases in the project cost, the timeline, and will cause unnecessary disruptions to our very important services. It will also significantly impact our ability to raise funds to complete the project in its entirety. Thank you for your prioritization of completing this important community asset. And additionally, we'd also hope that you would consider fully funding the major maintenance arts and culture program at $10 million. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Allison Otu, followed by Masavi Perea.
Hi, good morning. My name is Allison Otu, and I am a very proud board member for the Children's Museum of Phoenix and the mom of two very enthusiastic and frequent visitors to the museum. We've shared with you all the impact the museum has, and we are unable to serve everyone because we are at capacity. We are poised to grow. We have funders lined up to help, but they are now pausing until the building is renovated. In a letter in your packet last week, Maureen Mago from the Steele Foundation writes, "Our foundation has every expectation of remaining a valuable partner to the museum. However, any new investment in programs are best leveraged once renovations are complete. We are unable to direct any funds towards these renovations, rather encourage the city as owners of the building to bring the rooms up to code and occupancy standards. The museum, along with our donors, are committed to raising an additional $5 million to outfit our rooms, exhibits, classrooms, and amenities for the public. Thank you so much for your consideration."
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Masavi Perea, followed by Matthew Schaefer.
Buen día, good morning everyone. Masavi Perea with Chispa, Arizona. Just to also again acknowledge the good work on the Environmental and Sustainability Department, that hopefully there are no changes there. And to remind the necessity of the parks on the west and south side, but especially the Estrella Civic Space that can change the area and that will benefit many, many members of the community. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Matthew Schaefer, followed by Lisa Perez.
Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee, as you may recall, I am the Managing Director of the Phoenix Theater Company and have worked for the company for 16 years. But I'm not here today to advocate for my own benefit. I'm here to advocate on behalf of the theater artists and aspiring artists from age 5 to 100 with mobility limitations. These artists are seeing the world become more welcoming and equitable to them each day. I urge the committee to fund the joint ADA project between the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Theater Company to allow these artists to participate in the Phoenix Theater Company's programming, including our already inclusive summer camp that can't accommodate people with mobility disabilities. Thank you all for your hard work, and thank you for listening.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Lisa Perez, followed by Abby Dunton.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, here again in support of Estrella Village and all that entails. I'd first like to thank you today for the quick work you did in the neighborhood and city services. I believe Estrella Branch Library was #1 ranked, so we thank you for that. I know it's only one hurdle, and there's more discussion to be had, but it's a nice hurdle to be passed. But here to support and ask you for your support for the Estrella Civic Space, which would be our regional park at 99th Avenue and Lower Buckeye. As you've heard from the speakers already and what you're going to hear from later, is it is a place that is needed. We need a gathering space. We need a place for our kids to go. I'm the mother of an 11-year-old, and there's nowhere to send my child to go play. Library is too far away. We don't have good transit systems for our kids to be able to get to another library that's far away. So it is something that is very much needed, and I said this last time, and that is this would be a quality of life game changer for that community. It's a big deal. And I will leave you with, again, the fact that there is no other funding mechanism that we can get. We can't use impact fees for this. It is important for us. We ask you to support this and to think really hard about how much this community needs it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Abby Dunton, followed by Jennifer Rouse.
I am here on behalf of 219,000 taxpayers in Estrella Village to speak regarding the importance of funding and developing the Estrella Civic Center. Cynthia Aguilar of the City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department completed a thorough survey of the prioritization of park projects, and they ranked the Estrella Civic Space as the second highest priority. According to their survey, the Estrella Civic Space would service 219,000 City of Phoenix residents. The nearest regional park and rec center are 8 miles from our homes. For 20 years, we have battled traffic and crossed freeways for a 16-mile round trip to access a City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation facility. Our park as a second priority was replaced with a rec center at Esteban Park. Esteban Park already has a park with courts and fields, ramadas, playgrounds, and a rec center 2.5 miles away. Our closest rec center is 8 miles away. I wish our children could play on courts, fields, and playgrounds while waiting for our rec center to be built, but they cannot because the closest regional park is also 8 miles away. 219,000 taxpayers waiting 20 years can only look at picture books of parks to know what it's like to play at a park. First it was my children, and now it will be my grandchildren who will sit at home and daydream about the park that is 8 miles away as they stare out the window at the empty lot eyesore that may never be developed during their childhood. So I implore the executive committee to please prioritize the funding of the Estrella Civic Center for the 219,000 taxpayers that have been waiting 20 years for their park.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Jennifer Rouse, followed by Chaz Salazar.
Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee, my name is Jennifer Rouse. I live in Levine Village in District 7. I'm here to ask that as you continue your deliberations in future meetings, you consider which areas of the city have been left behind. Accessibility is important for a city that should be here for all its residents. Please respect the knowledge and the research of city staff and their prioritizations. I speak now about our sister village and the Estrella Civic Space. This project did not rank as high in subcommittee as I feel it should have. Please take into consideration the lack of city amenities, specifically on the west side of Estrella Village, a region of our city that lacks public transit west of 75th Avenue. For years, I and many other Levine residents had advocated for our city parks and our community center. Estrella Village has waited more than 2 decades for their civic space to be developed. This is where people will gather and form relationships that will make our city stronger. Do not allow Estrella Village to continue to be left behind. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Chaz Salazar, followed by Michael Bernard.
Hello, my name is Chaz Salazar. I'm a flutist, teaching artist, and musical activist from South Phoenix. I'm here to speak in support of the Heat Resiliency Project in the Environment and Sustainability Committee, in support of the Estrella Civic Space as part of the Parks and Recreation Committee. But I want to note that across all of the subcommittees, that as you are prioritizing the different projects and as you are making cuts to them, we really need to focus and invest on our Black and Brown communities who have been historically and continue to be disinvested in, and I'm talking about South and West Phoenix. We need to put the money, these fundings, to those communities. I grew up in South Phoenix, and there's hasn't been a lot of investment in that community. And yes, so that's what I urge you to do. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Michael Bernard, followed by Anthony Fusco.
Good morning. I have a packet to pass out. This was requested by you all last week. My name is Michael Barnard. I'm the artistic director of the Phoenix Theater Company. The Phoenix Theater Company has been serving this community for 103 years. And with the advent of EDI that has blossomed in our country since COVID, there's been a greater desire and passion for young people and older people who are mobility challenged to believe that they can participate in summer camps, be technicians, artists, designers, staff members. We currently have a building that cannot adequately comply with these results. We were requested to provide information about another funding thing that we are doing. And I know that Vincent Van Vliet is going to be a speaker for us, and he yielded his time to me. May I continue, or do I need to wait?
Please continue.
Please continue. Okay. The building that's that we have been funding for is to complete phase 2 of a 2006 bond request, and that phase 2 has gone from a $5 million cost to a soaring $24 million cost. So we are desperately trying to raise those funds to try to bring our new building to ADA compliance, but it does not have anything to do with the current ADA situation that we have in our current facility. So we would request that you consider our bond request to bring our administrative areas and our rehearsal halls up to ADA compliance. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Anthony Fusco, followed by Taylor Earl.
As an educator of 17 years, I've always made emotional connections with my students, inviting them to research, using the primary source, living memory of the event. The Holocaust was the darkest days of human history, and it was important then as it is now that students learn from the true narrative history. And as a graduate student at NAU, I researched 4 local perspectives of the Holocaust back in 2009, and one of them was a Nazi, a Waffen-SS, a goose-stepping German soldier. I learned then, as I know now know that hate is very real, and this is why we need a Holocaust Education Center in downtown Phoenix as the remedy. And now, as time fleets and the aging population of Holocaust survivors gets closer to the inevitable, it's so vitally important to cement their personal narratives, their living memories, their connections to Phoenix, their calls to action to be better people, to have our parks, their artifacts, and their experiences of survival need not be ever forgotten. And now I'm working against the clock as the Arizona Jewish Historical Society Education Coordinator and the Phoenix Holocaust Association Board member to make this a reality, to educate 1.6 million on the horrors of the Holocaust and other genocides in a venue enriched with Phoenician history. Soon, the first generation, these precious survivors, as a practicing Catholic calls family, now knows that they'll be gone. And this is why it's so vitally important than ever before to support this initiative, to build this Holocaust Education Center, to turn aggression into altruism and turn hate into hope. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Taylor Earl, followed by Mona Osana.
Good morning. My name is Taylor Earl. As you've already seen, obviously, there's no bad things on any of these lists. And as we talk about parks in particular, I'm here to advocate for the Estrella Civic Center. Again, no bad parks on the list, but it's a prioritization of good, better, and best, or in this case, those that are needed, very needed, and extremely needed. And if you look, and what you heard the Director of Parks look at and prioritize the park as a second on the list because of the need that exists in the community. Now, there's many other parks on the list that talk about upgrades or enhancements to existing parks. I think we should prioritize those that don't actually exist yet. There's nothing to enhance or to upgrade that doesn't actually exist. And I think if you look at the other areas of the city and you look at where the parks are already distributed, you will find that we have parkland that's not yet been built and we have a citizenry that's not yet being served. So again, this is about prioritizing those parks where there is a greater need than in other places. Nothing's ever going to be considered bad or easy to cut, but I think we prioritize where the greatest need is. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Mona Osana, followed by Dr. Dirk Van Leenen.
Madam Chairwoman and members of the Phoenix City Council Committee, my name is Mona Osana, born in Iraq, ethnically Assyrian, a Christian genocide survivor. I stand here today claiming victory over the criminal acts of a dictator named Saddam Hussein, known as the Butcher of Baghdad. I want to express my support for the Arizona Jewish Historical Society's Holocaust educational mission to build a Holocaust Educational Center and museum to teach the lessons of the Holocaust that apply to everyone in jeopardy of being discriminated, oppressed, or victimized by prejudice and hate. Stories like mine must be told, and there is no better outlet than the Arizona Jewish Historical Society, because still today, people do not understand or even know about the silent struggle of people across the world. In most cases, the unawareness, the silence, the negligence of the world made us as survivors feel abandoned and forgotten. The Arizona Jewish Historical Society is an advocate who genuinely cares. They found me to give me the opportunity to use their platform to tell my story, meaning they are proactive and intentional with their help. The Arizona Jewish Historical Society is a much-needed essential institution as a resource to help survivors heal from the trauma. The Arizona Jewish Historical Society is needed because they unite survivors' voices against the injustice across the world and give survivors validation to find closure. We are the voices that have risen from the ashes of persecution, and collectively we are allowed to tell our stories, which could be the only closure we ever find since justice has escaped us. This is why I am here today. It is vital that institutions like that of the Arizona Jewish Historical Society is supported, funded, not only for their projects today, but for the future, to build, but also to grow and multiply. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Dr. Dirk von Leenen, followed by Laura Earle.
For the last 20 years, I have been educating the American youth in the Holocaust, and I wrote 3 books on it. These are 2. And I got together with the Jewish Heritage Center, and they get me talks to do for audiences, and I am delighted to do that. But I found out that the audience does not know much about the Holocaust. And as a Holocaust society, I am very amazed that the youth doesn't know anything. I had 100 talks at schools, and I do that for free, and audiences of 500 and even 1,000 youth. And any question they ask shows that they don't know anything about the Holocaust. And for that reason, it is so important that the Jewish Historical Society is building this new historical center so that the youth can actually see what happened and almost experience it. Thank you for your information.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Laura Earle, followed by Marcus Ceniceros.
Good morning. My name is Laura Earle, and I'm here to voice support for the Estrella Civic Space. I was here last week as well and heard the various presentations. There are many great proposals, but I feel that the Estrella Civic Space should be higher on the list. Unlike other areas, we do not have a space like this for our community. We've been waiting for this area since 2004. Other areas throughout the valley already have amenities like this, and this committee is being asked to improve them. But in our area on the west side of Phoenix, we don't have anything to upgrade. It is just a field. I urge you to put the Estrella Civic Space higher on the list of the park space improvements. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Marcus Ceniceros, followed by Lisa Sun.
Good morning, members of the Executive Committee. My name is Marcus Ceniceros. I am here to advocate for what many of the people in this room have advocated for, a long overdue promise to our community. This project would be a life change, a habit of change for our community. Growing up as a kid in the district, and Estrella Civic and Country Place specifically, we never had a place to gather in the city of Phoenix. We always had to drive 10 to 15 minutes away from our city. And the city of Avondale, I will say, has done a far better job of taking care of its residents than the city of Phoenix. For this very reason, this project is very crucial to get done to our community. Having a community center, a library would be such a game changer for the youth of this community. So please get this done for us. Thank you.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Lisa Sun, followed by Sandra Bassett.
Hello, Chair and committee members. My name is Lisa Sun, and I am a resident of the Australia Village community. I am also the state representative-elect for LD22. I am speaking today to voice my support for the funding allocation for the Parks and Recreation Australia Civic Space. The Australia Civic Space is something that could benefit us all. As a representative-elect, I think it's unjustifiable how much of this has been stymied with red tape. An entire generation has passed over the last 2 decades that was promised and has still yet to be delivered. There are many communities like ours, some in even more dire need. Many who have been marginalized and are tired of asking, demanding more, and only receiving neglect. I don't think government should ignore the least of us, only prioritize or serve those with power, money, and influence, instead of top-down approach. I think it's time we start from the bottom up, demand more from this council and all elected officials, and address the needs and concerns of us all, of those people in our communities who have been pushed aside until a more convenient season. Thank you for your consideration.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Sandra Bassett, followed by Scott Jacobson.
Good morning. I am Sandra Bassett, the CEO for the Phoenix Center for the Arts, and it's truly a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you, Madam Chair, members of the Executive Committee. Phoenix Center for the Arts, if you don't know, is located on the campus of the Margaret T. Hance Park, which is into the bond for about $17 million. We're also on the campus that is being utilized currently in the bond for about $21 million, known as the North Building, which is destined to become the Latino Cultural Community Center. We initially were into the ask of about $8 million for renovations and updates to our building, which, like everyone else, is experiencing critical and deferred maintenance. We are currently asking for about 1.4. I would like to say that in working with the city and Parks and Rec, we have been successful in identifying and beginning to correct some of these critical and delayed measures within our organization. But we're still asking for the rest of the money to do what we need to do to continue serving the over 50 organizations that look to us to be able to provide areas for opportunity in arts and culture by eliminating financial barriers to engagement. So we thank the bond committee for the process. We look forward to coming back in 5 years to ask for the remaining money that we actually lowered this time in the process. We still need it. We're going to be back to ask for it, and we continue to ask for full funding in arts and culture because we need it, but more importantly, the citizens of this community in the city of Phoenix need it as well. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and most of all, your support of the Phoenix Center for the Arts in this process.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Scott Jacobson, followed by Sasan Abdurrahman.
Good morning, Madam Chair and most honorable committee members. I'm Scott Jacobson. I'm the Vice Chair of Valley-Wise FQHC, handling all the clinics, and McDowell Clinic, which is at the Parsons Center, is one of our trophies. Is for many decades has been one of the most important HIV/AIDS centers of excellence in treating people with HIV in this valley. So the expansion of the Parsons Center, number one, is a major investment in public health. We all know public health needs to be invested in at all levels. And two, Maricopa County still ranks in the top 10 new cases of HIV and AIDS in the United States. Some cities have gotten rid of HIV, have been able to deal with it, but not here. So we need to invest more to make sure that young people do not contract HIV and AIDS. Thank you.
Our final speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Sasan Abdurrahman.
Good morning. My name is Sosan Abdurrahman. I'm here representing Chispa, Arizona. To underscore the connection between neighborhood conditions and health, Virginia Commonwealth University has created a series displaying life expectancy values across American cities. It illustrates the vastly different health outcomes experienced by Americans living just a few miles apart due to factors such as limited opportunities for residents to exercise, walk, or cycle, unreliable or expensive public transit, proximity to highways, factories, or other sources of toxic agents, and residential segregation and features that isolate communities. Due to decades of racist and inequitable city planning, this list of factors directly describes life for residents of South and West Phoenix. And I want to emphasize that this was not an accident, but rather through direct policy decided in rooms by committees just like this very one. The VCU study found a difference of up to 14 years in life expectancy between South and West Phoenix and North and East Phoenix. 14 years simply because of how Phoenix has chosen to invest and develop. I urge the committee to consider the data showing which areas in Phoenix are in most need of investment. I urge you to prioritize the communities that have been systemically left behind by this city. I urge you to prioritize investments in public transit and the Vision Zero Road Safety Action Plan. I urge you to prioritize parks investments, including the Estrella Civic Space Park. And I thank the Environmental Committee and Chair for the prioritization of heat resiliency projects because those investments will keep our communities safe. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that was our final speaker.
This concludes our public comment period, and I want to thank everyone who participated today. Let me ask now if the committee members have any brief remarks in response to the public comment. Based on
just a brief one. Thank you everybody for coming down. It's the hardest decisions we're going to have to make, and your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Based on today's discussion, do any committee members have any requests for future meeting agenda items? Our next meeting, November 7th, where we will continue our deliberations and possibly formulate recommendations. So thank you all in advance and see you in a week. The meeting is adjourned.
And indescribably beautiful. Where the crystalline lime coats are not copper stained, they are pure white, sometimes resembling walls of ice, and sometimes carved and modeled drift of snow. King Solomon's temple was not a more beautiful nor befitting lodge room for the ancient and honorable Brotherhood of Freemasons.
Thanks to all who made this exhibition possible, including Phoenix Friends of Public Art and Freeport Mac Moran. On behalf of the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture, we surely hope you enjoy this magnificent virtual tour. The next time